Meet John. John is 25 years old. He makes $52,000 a year. And sitting in his checking account right now is exactly $10,000. That's it. That's the whole fortune. $10,000 and a small salary. Most people would look at that number and laugh at the idea of ever becoming a millionaire. John almost did too. But here's what nobody tells you. That $10,000 is not the important part of this story. The salary is not the important part either. There is one decision John is about to make. And that single decision is worth roughly $800,000 to him by the time he turns 55. Run the numbers, and a 25-year-old with $10,000 and a $52,000 salary can absolutely retire with $1 million. Not with luck, not with a hot stock, with math. The problem is that most people do the opposite of what John is about to do. They treat the $10,000 as the hero of the story. They chase returns, they panic, they pay a fee they never even see. And 30 years later, they wonder where their million went. So let's actually walk through it, the real math, the exact monthly number. And the one silent thing that quietly steals $203,000 from people who did almost everything right. Because this is not a motivational video. There's no vision board, no hustle, no side gig you have to start at 5 a.m. This is arithmetic. Cold, patient, unstoppable arithmetic. And by the end, you'll have John's exact plan, the exact dollar figure for your own age, and the 3 traps that turn a guaranteed million into a disappointing $470,000. Stay with the numbers. They're about to do something your paycheck never could. First, let's be honest about the fear in your stomach right now. You've heard just invest and you'll be a millionaire 1,000 times. And it always feels like a lie told by someone who already had money. Because here's the trap. When someone says $10,000 becomes $1 million, your brain assumes they mean the 10 grand does all the work by itself. It doesn't. Not even close. Left completely alone, John's $10,000 grows to about $198,000 over 30 years at a normal market return. That's real. That's good. But that is not $1 million. It's a fifth of one. So most people hear that, feel disappointed, and quit before they start. That's the first mistake. The second mistake is worse. People who don't quit often reach for danger instead. They think a small starting amount means they need enormous returns to catch up. So they gamble. They chase the thing that went up 400% last year. And they get wiped out. Here's what actually happens to the people who make it. They are almost boring. They pick a number, they automate it. And they refuse to touch it for 30 years, even when everyone around them is selling. The gap between 198,000 and 1,000 is not made of luck. It's made of one habit and one number. And here's the part that should make you angry. Both mistakes come from the same place. Nobody ever showed these people the actual math. They were handed slogans instead of numbers. Invest for the long term. Let it ride. Time in the market. All true and all useless without a single real figure attached. So we're going to attach the figures. Every claim in this video has a number behind it. The starting amount, the monthly deposit, the rate of return, the fee, the final balance. You will see exactly where every dollar comes from and exactly where it goes. Here's what the data shows. Let's build John's plan from zero, dollar by dollar, and find the exact monthly amount that turns a small salary into 7 figures. Let's start with the engine that makes all of this possible, the stock market. Over the last 100 years, the S&P 500 has returned about 10.2% per year on average, including dividends. That's the whole American market, 500 of the biggest companies in one basket. Now, 10% is the nominal number. Adjusted for inflation, the real return is closer to 7%. We're going to use both so you see the honest range, not just the pretty one. This matters because John is not going to pick stocks. He's going to buy the entire market through a low-cost index fund. One purchase, 500 companies, no guessing. Now let's meet the 2 paths. On one path is John. He's 25, he has his $10,000. And he's about to start adding money every single month automatically and never stop. On the other path is Carla. Carla is also 25. Carla is smart, ambitious, and impatient. She has her own $10,000. But Carla is convinced that slow investing is for suckers. She wants to get there faster. Same age, same $10,000. Same starting line, 2 completely different endings. Let's give John his target first. He wants $1,000 by age 55. That gives him exactly 30 years of growth. Here's the first piece of magic. That $10,000 he starts with, at a 10% average return over 30 years, it grows to about $198,000 on its own. He never adds a cent to that original chunk, and it multiplies almost 20 times. At the more conservative 7% real return, that same $10,000 grows to about $81,000. Still incredible. You put in 10 grand, you get back 8 times as much adjusted for inflation. But John needs $1 million, not $198,000. So the original $10,000 is not the plan. It's the seed. The monthly deposits are the plant. So here's the real question. How much does John have to add every month to close the gap between $198,000 and $1,000? Run the numbers, starting with his $10,000 at a 10% average return over 30 years. John needs to invest just $350 a month. Let that land. $355 a month, that's it. On a $52,000 salary, that's roughly 8% of his income before taxes. It's about $12 a day. It's a nice dinner out once a week redirected into his future. Think about how ordinary that number is. $355 a month is a car payment on a modest used car. It's a gym membership, plus a few streaming services, plus takeout twice a week. Millions of people spend more than that on things they can't even remember buying a month later. John isn't going to spend it on a car that loses value. He's going to spend it on a machine that gains value every year for 30 years, without asking him for anything but patience. And 30 years later, John crosses $1 million. The math is not close. It's not a maybe. It lands at $1,047. Say that total balance out loud. $1,847. Built from a below-average salary, a $10,000 head start, and a deposit smaller than most people's rent. Now here's where Carla's story gets painful, because Carla, remember, thought $355 a month was too slow. The single biggest misconception about this whole plan is that the starting amount is what makes you rich. It isn't. Let's prove it with John's own numbers. His $10,000 growing for 30 years at 10% becomes about $198,000. His $355 a month over that same 30 years becomes about $802,000. Look at that split. The lump sum you were so worried about does 20% of the work. The tiny monthly habit does 80%. This is the fact that changes everything. You do not need to start with a lot. You need to start and then keep going. The $10,000 buys you a head start of about $198,000. Your consistency buys you the other $800,000. So if you're sitting there with $2,000 instead of $10,000, you have not lost the game. You've lost a head start worth maybe $40,000 in 30 years. The engine, the monthly habit, is still completely intact. Most people get this exactly backwards. They wait years to save up enough to start. Every year they wait costs them far more than the amount. They're waiting to accumulate. There's a shape to this growth that almost nobody expects, and once you see it, you can never unsee it. Compounding is not a straight line. It's a curve that starts almost flat and then explodes at the end. For the first decade, John's account grows slowly. It feels like nothing is happening. That's the part where most people quit. Watch the actual pace. In John's first 10 years, his balance climbs by a modest amount. Between years 10 and 20, it rises by roughly $123,000. But between years 30 and 33, a stretch of just 3 years, a mature portfolio can jump by nearly $345,000. Read that again. 3 years near the end add more than an entire decade in the middle. The money you invest at 25 isn't valuable because of what it does in your 20s. It's valuable because of what it becomes in your 50s. This is the cruel joke of compounding. The rewards all live at the far end of the curve, which is exactly the part impatient people never reach. They plant the tree, water it for 6 years, then dig it up because it isn't tall enough. John's advantage over Carla was never intelligence. It was that he stayed on the curve long enough to reach the steep part. Let's talk about the cruelest and most beautiful number in all of finance. Time. John started at 25. He needed $350 a month. Watch what happens if he waits. If John starts at 30 instead of 25, he only has 25 years to grow. His $10,000 now grows to about $120,000 instead of $198,000. And to still hit $1 million, his monthly deposit jumps from $355 to $663 a month. He waited 5 years. His required payment nearly doubled. Start at 35 and it's worse. Now the monthly number is about $1,220. Start at 40 with just 15 years left. And John would need over $2,300 a month to reach the same million. Same goal, same market. The only thing that changed was when he began. 5 years of waiting cost him roughly $300 a month forever. Here's the brutal way to say it. The best time to start was 10 years ago. The second best time is the 30 seconds after this video ends. Now for the part everyone forgets to mention, the market does not go up in a straight line. In those 30 years John invests, he will live through at least 4 or 5 serious crashes. The market will drop 20%, 30%, sometimes 50%. His account will show losses that look like a year of salary, vanishing. There was a stretch called the Lost Decade, from 2000 to 2009. where the S&P 500 returned about -1% per year for 10 straight years. A full decade of investing that looked on paper like a total failure. Here's what nobody tells you about that decade. The people who kept buying the whole way down became the biggest winners of the following decade, because every automatic $355 deposit during the crash bought shares on sale. John's plan doesn't just survive crashes, it feeds on them. A crash is a discount, and his automatic deposits keep buying at the discount whether he feels brave or not. The danger was never the crash. The danger is the human holding the account who panics and sells at the bottom. Here's a statistic that should be taught in every high school and almost never is. Most of the stock market's gains over any given decade come from a tiny handful of days. If you had stayed fully invested but happened to miss just the 10 best days in the market over a 20-year stretch, your total return would be cut roughly in half. Now here's the trap. Those 10 best days almost always happen right in the middle of the scary times, often within days of the worst drops. The biggest up days and the biggest down days are neighbors. So the person who panics and sells during a crash isn't just avoiding the bottom. They're guaranteeing they'll be sitting in cash when the market snaps back the hardest. They miss the rebound that would have healed their account. John never has to guess when those 10 days are coming because he's always in the market. His automatic deposit doesn't have moods. It doesn't watch the news. It just buys on the green days and the red days alike. This is the quiet superpower of automation. It removes the one variable that destroys most portfolios. Your own emotions on a bad day. Let's kill the salary myth, because it stops more people than any crash ever will. John makes $52,000. That is not a big salary, it's slightly below the American median household income, and he still gets to $1 million with room to spare. The reason is simple. Wealth is not built from the size of your paycheck. It's built from the gap between what you earn and what you spend, invested consistently. A surgeon making $400,000 who spends $399,000 builds nothing. A teacher making $52,000 who invests $355 a month builds $1 million. The math does not care about your job title. It cares about your habit. There are documented cases of janitors and secretaries who died with millions, having never earned more than a modest wage. They didn't have a secret. They had a monthly deposit and 40 years of refusing to touch it. So when you tell yourself you can't afford to invest, be precise. What you usually mean is you'd have to give up something today. That's a real cost, but it is not the same as being unable. And here's the part that gets better with time. John's salary won't stay at $52,000 forever. Raises happen. Every time his income goes up, he can nudge that $355 higher without feeling it, because he never got used to spending the raise in the first place. If John simply increases his deposit by a small amount each year, in line with his raises, he doesn't just reach $1 million, he blows past it. The plan we're describing is the floor, not the ceiling. It's what happens if his income never grows at all. That's why a small salary is a starting point, not a sentence. The habit scales with you. The paycheck was never the engine. You were. There's a legal way to make John's million arrive sooner. And most people leave it sitting on the table. The government offers accounts like a 401k and a Roth IRA that let your investments grow without being taxed every year. Inside these accounts, your gains compound untouched by the tax man. In a normal account, John pays taxes on his gains along the way, which quietly slows his compounding. Inside a Roth, that same $350 a month grows completely tax-free, and he pays zero tax when he pulls it out at retirement. On top of that, many employers match your 401k contributions. That's free money added to your deposit. If John's employer matches 4% of his salary, that's about $2,000 a year he didn't have to earn, going straight into the engine. Here's the order that matters. Get the full employer match first, because it's an instant 100% return. Then fill up a Roth IRA, then everything else. Most people invest in exactly the wrong order and hand thousands to taxes they never needed to pay. Now let's go back to Carla, who thought $355 a month was too slow. Carla took her $10,000 and went looking for the fast lane. She chased the stock everyone was talking about. She jumped into whatever had tripled last year. She sold in fear when it dropped and bought back in when it felt safe again. She was busy. She was active. She felt smart. And here's what actually happened. Study after study shows the average active investor underperforms the boring index they were trying to beat, often by 3 or 4% a year. Not because they're stupid, but because they buy high on excitement and sell low on fear. Carla didn't get 10%. Over her 30 years, her panic and her chasing dragged her real return down to about 6%. Same starting $10,000, same $355 a month. Different behavior. Her ending balance was not $1 million. It was about $470,000. She did everything John did, except she couldn't sit still. And sitting still cost her more than $500,000. Here's the part that stings the most. Carla worked harder than John. She spent hours researching. She lost sleep over her positions. She checked her account 3 times a day. John checked his maybe twice a year. He did less, felt less stress, and ended up with more than double her money. In investing, effort and reward often run in opposite directions. The more you touch it, the more you tend to break it. Let's name the fear that keeps people in cash, because it's the most expensive fear there is. Most people are scared of losing money in a crash. So they keep their savings in a bank account earning almost nothing, feeling safe. But there's a slower, quieter loss happening the entire time, and it's called inflation. At roughly 3% inflation a year, money sitting in a checking account loses about half its buying power over 25 years. John's coworker who kept his $10,000 safe in the bank didn't avoid loss. He locked in a guaranteed loss in slow motion while John's money grew. The stock market feels risky because it moves. The bank account feels safe because it sits still. But over 30 years, the truly dangerous choice is the one that sits still, because inflation never stops eating. Real safety over a long enough timeline is not the absence of movement. It's the presence of growth that beats inflation. That's the market's job. And it has done that job for 100 years straight. Here is the twist almost nobody sees coming, and it's the most important number in this entire video. Let's say John does everything right. He stays calm. He never panics. He gets the full 10% average return, but he lets a financial advisor manage his money for a 1% annual fee. 1%. It sounds like a rounding error. Watch what that 1% actually does over 30 years. Without the fee, John's plan reaches $1,847. With that same 1% fee quietly skimmed off every single year, his account reaches just $797,000. That 1% fee cost John $203,628. More than 20% of his entire life's investment gone to a fee he barely noticed, on a statement he never read closely. Here's the formula the studies use, and it will haunt you. A 1% annual fee compounding over 30 years eats almost 30% of your final wealth. Not 1%, 30? The fee doesn't just take 1% of your money. It takes 1% of your money, plus all the growth that money would have earned every year forever. That's why it's silent, and that's why it's deadly. This is why John buys a low-cost index fund himself, where the fee is often less than 1/10 of 1%. The difference between a 1% fee and a 0.05% fee is not small. In John's case, it's a $200,000 house. Let's make this concrete, because buying an index fund still sounds abstract to a lot of people. John opens a brokerage account or a Roth IRA. It takes about 15 minutes on his phone. Inside it, he buys one thing, a total market or S&P 500 index fund with a rock-bottom expense ratio. That single fund holds a slice of 500 companies. Apple, Microsoft, the bank he uses, the store he shops at, the company that makes his phone. When any of them grows, he grows with it. When one dies, the index quietly replaces it. Then he does the most important part. He turns on automatic investing. $355 pulled from his checking account on the same day every month forever. He never has to decide again. He never has to feel brave. The machine just runs. That's the entire strategy. One account, one fund, one automatic transfer. People expect the path to $1 million to be complicated because complicated feels like it should pay more. It doesn't. Simple wins, precisely because you'll actually stick to it. Here's the last psychological trick, and it's the one that quietly separates the millionaires from everyone with good intentions. John's plan does not rely on discipline. It relies on automation. The $355 leaves his account before he ever sees it, before he can talk himself out of it, before a sale or a bad week gives him an excuse. This matters because willpower is a terrible retirement plan. Every human has months where money is tight and skipping one. Deposit feels reasonable. One skip becomes two. Two becomes a habit of not investing. And the machine grinds to a halt. Automation removes the decision entirely. John treats his investment like rent. It's not optional. It's not a choice he remakes every month. It's just gone, working for him in the background. The people who win at this are not the most motivated. They're the ones who set it up once so that motivation never has to enter the picture again. Decide once, then let the system carry you for 30 years. So let's put the whole thing together, because the real lesson is not the one you expected walking in. You came here thinking the hard part was finding $1,000. Getting the return, picking the right investment, being smart, but look at what actually decided John's outcome. The return was the same 10% market available to everyone. The starting amount, that famous $10,000, only ever accounted for a fifth of the result. The strategy was as simple as buying one fund. Everything that made the difference was about not interfering, not waiting to start, not panicking in the crash, not chasing the hot thing like Carla did, not letting a 1% fee bleed you for 30 years. Here's the line worth remembering. You don't get rich by being brilliant with your money. You get rich by refusing to be stupid with it for 30 years in a row. The $1 million was never hiding in a secret investment. It was hiding in your own patience. The market was always willing to make you a millionaire. The only question was whether you'd let it or get in its way. John's $10,000 didn't make him rich. His refusal to touch it did. And notice who the villain of this story really was. It wasn't the market, which did its job faithfully for 30 years. It wasn't the economy or the crashes or the lost decade. In every version where John ended up poorer, the person standing between him and his million was John himself. The version who panicked, the version who chased, the version who waited, the version who never read the fee. That's the strange, freeing truth of this whole thing. You are not fighting Wall Street for your $1 million. You're only ever fighting your own worst impulses. Beat those, stay boring, stay automatic, and the math does the rest on its own. So here's your real homework, and it's smaller than you think. You don't need to find $1 million. You need to find one number, your monthly number, and automate it before your next paycheck lands. For a 25-year-old, it might be $355. For a 40-year-old, it's more, which is exactly why you don't wait. And the next time someone promises to manage your money, ask them one question. What is your total annual fee in dollars over 30 years? If they can't answer it plainly, you already know it's costing you a house. The most important financial decision you can make is knowing the difference between a strategy that's right for you and a strategy that's right for someone selling to you. Do the math. Make the decision that matches your reality, not someone else's sales pitch. Because the million was never the hard part. Sitting still while it grew always was.